the moral, the ethical, the intellectual, the astral, the cosmic, the celestial, house not made with hands.
The alchemical axiom or principle of vitriol. Visita interiora terrae, rectificando inveniis occultum lapidum. Visit the interior of the earth, and rectifying therein, you will find the hidden stone.
You know, if you don't transmute yourself first, you will transmute nothing.
The axiom of fixing the volatile and volatilizing the fixed.
Being able to weave hermetic principles into our social fabric.
Filling in the fractal spaces till we get to the most rarefied abstract plane of the celestial realm.
You know, that's alchemy, that's understanding nature.
Question everything.
Symbols are far beyond words, right? Symbols are the touch point where the mind enters into the sublime, incomprehensible, translinguistic depths of a direct connection with the ultimate that I would refer to as the divine.
There is truth in the Western esoteric traditions. It has been contributed to and refined and evolved over the course of millennia by what we can conceive universally to be the greatest minds to ever exist.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Philosophical Minds Podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric. From the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all, join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. Thank you all, and let's get into it. All right, my guest tonight is Travis McHenry, actor, paranormal investigator, Grand Duke of West Arctica, occult author, and CEO of Bloodstone Studios. Is there anything additional that you want to add about yourself or your background?
There's other things, but we don't have to talk about it today.
Okay, we'll get into some of them, but it's cool. I want to ask you right off the bat, I noticed do you have a tattoo on both of your hands?
Both hands and both inner
sigils?
Arms. Yeah, these are sigils. Yeah.
All right.
So this one's Lucifuge Rofacal, who is the Prime Minister of Hell. Lucifuge was the Ace of Pentacles in the Occult Tarot, my very first tarot deck. So this was the first hand tattoo I got. And then this one is Archangel Uriel, and that he was the tower in my Angel Tarot deck.
Nice balance. Yeah, it seems like you have all your books, your tarot decks, you got angels and demons. You must be like a Gemini or something. Do you have any Gemini astrology?
I am 100% Gemini. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. June 4th is my birthday.
Okay, it explains a lot. All right. That's cool. Yeah, I was doing this project where I was revamping the Shemha Mefresh sigils for a project of a buddy of mine, and just kind of searching through different documents and stuff, and I came across the Angel, however you say that.
Anjanamacon is the way I pronounce it.
And I didn't see, at least in this document that I had found, I didn't see like an author or any reference like that, and I was like, who made this? But it was really beautiful and well organized, and I think in searching through it, I came across the Grimoire of Heaven and Hell. And so is that like, are they the same thing? Are they different? Or
they are not. So the way the evolution of those, there's actually 3 texts, and one is completely impossible to find. The Grimoire of Dark Souls came first, and that's a grimoire that deals mostly with the demons. And then I created the Anjanamacon next, and that obviously deals with the angels. And then the third one is the combination of the two with some additional material, which is the Grimoire of Heaven and Hell. So I had always intended those first two texts to be these very limited edition things that were given to my Kickstarter backers, and really nobody else would get a copy. That's why my name isn't in it. There's no copyright information. Like, I wanted these to feel like those old handwritten manuscripts from the Renaissance period. And then the Grimoire of Heaven and Hell, that's like a normal book, but it's got the feel of an old grimoire.
Yeah, I love the aesthetic, and it's just the way it's all presented. At least what I've looked at, it's like, this is nice. This is like what you'd hope for, and it's cool. I really like all of the various imagery. I don't know who did the artwork for all this, but it's really aesthetically pleasing and nice. And you have like all the different various angels, and they have their own unique artwork that goes with them, including the sigils and all that. So that it's just beautiful, man.
So I made all those sigils myself. I actually went to Paris to the Arsenal Library and got access to a bunch of they're essentially Keys of Solomon or Testament of Solomon, variations of those. I got access to a bunch of the original documents. They gave me like my own little research room so I could be undisturbed while I copied all of them with my phone. I literally photographed everything. The original seals, the original symbols, brought everything back to America and actually created the sigils out of those original seals and translated that text out of French and Latin. Most of it was in French, but translated all that. And that's really where the Angenomicon came from. And then the Grimoire of Heaven and Hell, of course, expanded off of that. So the sigils were all created by me. And I actually, I was so grateful to the Arsenal Library for giving me that kind of access to their old manuscripts that I put those in the public domain. So I created like a high resolution PDF that's got all those sigils in it and said, hey, share this, put this everywhere, put them on Wikipedia. I don't care. Make these available to the world. And it's interesting. Nobody shares that document. Everyone who got a copy of it, I gave it out to over 1,000 people. They all kept it for themselves.
I wonder if it might have been the one I worked from. It was a French manuscript.
Right.
I don't know. It was sent to me in a PDF form, but that's really crazy, man.
Yeah.
And so do you speak French?
I used to be pretty proficient at French. I've been to France a few times and had no problems getting by. It was the first language that I ever learned. But in the past 2 years, I started learning Portuguese because I live in Brazil as well as the United States. So the Portuguese has pushed all the French to the side. But I went to Belgium 2 years ago, and the French was still pretty good, but I wasn't able to speak it as fluently as I once did.
Wow. So when you were doing the translation work, was it something that you were doing with a team or yourself, or?
No, it was just all me.
Wow.
I had two people help me with the Latin part because at the time I was doing the Latin translations, my Latin was really terrible. It's better than it was. It still isn't great. But I can sit and read a document that's written in Latin and get the gist of it. I can pretty much understand what's in there. If I were to want to create a book out of that, I would want to go through a translator and, really take my time with it, use a Latin dictionary to make sure I'm making the correct word choices.
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw a couple of your on your channel, your YouTube channel, where you were displaying some of your books, and I don't know if these ones are publicly available. They might have been special quality ones, but yeah, just these really nice. I don't know what the finish was on it. I don't know if it was leather or whatnot, but you had some good, nice quality looking.
You're probably talking about the Grimoire of Heaven and Hell. There's a hand-bound version of that. I did, I think, 130 copies, and the paper has been aged. There was this company. It was a husband and wife team in Washington D.C. that did aged documents. You could buy a copy of the Constitution that looks like it's 200 years old. Well, I said, hey, can I just get a bunch of these blank pages? And so they were stocking me up on this stuff. I buy thousands of sheets at a time. And then I would have to fight with my printer to get them to actually print. But I printed in 135 copies on this aged parchment paper, and then had a woodworker in Long Beach make the covers. So the covers are actually made out of wood, like with this really nice varnish finish on them, and actual copper leaf and brass leaf to create the sigil on the front of the book. And then this guy I know, he was a tailor. That was his formal training. I hired him to bind books. He was out of work. He said, I need a job. I said, listen, I got 135 books you can bind for me. So he taught himself bookbinding and bound all these books for me. So yeah, it was, but that Grimoire of Heaven and Hell, that original hand-bound version, like if you had that in your house and somebody came in who didn't really know you, they would be afraid to know you. Like they wouldn't want to open the book. They would not want to come visit you a second time.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's badass. It's super detail oriented and beautiful, and I've dabbled a little bit in bookbinding, and it's a lot of work. I've got all kinds of tools, but I just haven't had the time to develop my skill at it. But I'm a fan of good quality books. So yeah, that's cool. I wish I would have known about it when you first released it. It's amazing, man. So how long have you been doing Bloodstone? How long has that been going now?
So I founded Bloodstone Studios in 2018, September 14th, 2018. But I actually created my first tarot deck about a year before that. 2017 was when I made the occult tarot, which I called the Demon Possessed Tarot. And I really made it for myself. I had spent a few years studying tarot, so I felt like I knew a lot. And I wanted to make a deck for myself to help with my what we now call shadow work, but that wasn't the name for it back then. Um, so I make this deck and thinking nobody else would ever even see it. And then about a year, I did some rituals with it, and it was a very powerful deck. I mean, I got incredible results without 100% knowing what I was doing at that time. And then about a year later, I was really miserable. I had a terrible corporate job. I was recruiting nurses for a living. It was an awful, awful job. It paid really well, but it was just soul sucking. And so I decided to sort of create this ruse where I could get fired so that I could collect unemployment and figure out what I was going to do next. And during that period, I was like, within the first week, I was like, oh man, what am I going to do for a living? This unemployment isn't really going to cut it. Maybe this wasn't a great idea. I happened to share pictures of this deck with a friend of mine, and he said, listen, you got to put this thing on Kickstarter. This is going to make you a fortune. People want this deck. So he helped me set up that very first Kickstarter. This is in 2018. And I made more in that 1 month, that 30-day period, than I had made in the entire year previously at my corporate job. So even as I was creating the deck in 2017, I knew there was a potential to make other sort of offshoots of that concept, of that 72 demon concept. So I knew I could make at least 2 more decks. And then after that, I could figure out something else. So I did that. I made the Angel Tarot was the immediate successor to that. And then the Oracle of Heaven and Hell, which combines the angels and the demons on one card. And, you know, it's interesting because I had a 5-year plan. I had 5 years of products that I knew I could continue releasing, and I wouldn't have to have like a regular type job. And here we now are. I'm going on to year 7. I'm already into year 6. I'm going into year 7 now. So it's been really successful. You know, of course, I have publishing deals now with major publishers who basically license my works after I create them and publish them through Bloodstone Studios. Anything they don't want, I just keep publishing on my own. The stuff they want, I stop publishing through Bloodstone and just they release it in a mass market version.
Wow. Well, congratulations on the success, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You're a brave soul too. I'd be personally hesitant to work with the demon stuff. Do you ever have any sense of risk or anything like that working with that? Or
I never did ever. There have been a couple times where I felt a little uneasy in certain situations, but I credit it to my approach. You know, I just had breakfast with Mark Stavish on Sunday, I guess it was.
And TJ, right?
And TJ, yeah. And Mark is really against any kind of working with the demons. And he has a really good rationale for being against it. And I really respect his opinion. I view my approach to the demons as though I'm welcoming a friend into the room to sit down and say, hey, here's what I need. What do you need from me? And what can I get in return? When I work with the angels, it's not really like that. It's more of this reverence for the divine power that they're connected to. So it's a completely different approach. But the thing historically is most demonolators felt like they had to compel the demon to do something, to force it to do something using the spirit's chain or those kind of blasting rod. Imagine summoning something you want to help you with a tool called a blasting rod. Now that's not going to get the results you want, right? Right. So my approach has always been, and I put this in the occult tarot, I tell people when they're doing invocations with demons, you've got to come to them with a certain amount of humility, a certain amount of respect, and treat them as though they're a friend that is going to help you out, but recognize you got to help them out in return. There's a price to be paid for working with demons. I admit that openly. It is an ongoing process. You just gotta, if you're going to do that work, you have to be willing to pay the price. For example, if you're going to, Mark has compared it to like robbing a bank, I think. So if you're going to rob a bank, are you willing to go to prison? You have to be willing to, how much prison time am I willing to risk for how much money? Like that couple in New York who stole all that Bitcoin, $71 million worth, they're going to jail for 7 years. Well, they got to keep some of the Bitcoin. They found ways to hide that money. So it didn't all go back, Well, let me think. If I could get $5 million, would I stay in jail for 7 years? Minimum federal security, minimum security federal prison. I think I might, you start to make deals like that with yourself that not everybody's comfortable making.
Yeah, that's wild. Do you have, out of all the books, because you've got a number of books besides those as well, I think, and you have various different tarot decks. Out of all of your projects, do you have a particular favorite, one that you're just like really extra proud of or anything like that?
The Hieronymus Bosch Tarot is probably my personal favorite for me to use. I read with it quite a bit on my own. It's such a beautiful deck. The artwork in it is just gorgeous. And it was such a challenging deck for me to create. I had to go in and change the way the tarot itself works. Still 78 cards, still the basic outline. When you look at the cards, you get a sense you're looking at a tarot deck. It doesn't feel like an oracle deck, but I had to go through and change so much of it. And then the artwork itself, the MacBook that I was working with to make the other two decks was not powerful enough to manipulate those images of his because they're these gigantic high resolution images. So I had actually get a brand new computer. This would have been in 2019, I think, or 2020 maybe. I got a brand new computer and then was able to perform that work. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. But in terms of like when I'm dead and gone someday, what was my contribution to the esoteric community? I actually think the Angel Tarot is probably the thing that has done the most good in the world. People reach out to me all the time and tell me how much that deck has helped them process their own issues and stuff that they're going through. It's helped them to see the greater good within themselves, which is why I made it. That's what the deck's all about.
Yeah. Okay, so Hieronymus Bosch, I've heard of this name, or what? I feel like this is something that's like very popular that I should know, but I don't know who or what is Hieronymus Bosch.
So Hieronymus Bosch was a painter. He was in what today we call the Netherlands, but he was actually Flemish. So he was a painter back in the 1400s, and he painted these really cool, like some of his scenes are very apocalyptic, but if you think of Where's Waldo, that style of painting, that's the way his style of painting was. So it's these huge scenes with tons of stuff going on. And his most famous painting is called The Garden of Earthly Delights. And it's 3 different panels. And one panel is like the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve and all these bizarre animals and creatures. The center panel is what Earth would be like if humanity had never been kicked out of the Garden of Eden. If they had never sinned and just been allowed to live and multiply, what would that look like? So it's all these really bizarre scenes of like I don't even know where I would start with it. They're so strange. But people like interacting with nature in a way that they don't really do now. They create vehicles out of like fruit, for example.
Wow.
And then there's a lot of people like either having sex, but some of the sex is really weird. Like one guy is getting a thing of flowers stuffed up his ass. Um, so
Is
all
it
these
is it
strange
like
scenes.
semi-surrealist type?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Yeah. And then
Wow.
the third panel is hell. It's Bosch's way of saying even if we had never sinned in the traditional sense against God, humanity would have found a way to make a living hell on earth.
Mm.
And that's the final panel.
Wow. Yeah, that does sound interesting. I'm gonna have to check that one out. Is that your most recent one, or do you have a
No.
no?
Well, my most recent I try and release 2 decks a year or somewhere
Oh,
around
wow.
there. So my most recent deck that was published is the Eccles Sigil Oracle. That's an Oracle deck with, I got a copy of it right here. I partnered with Damien Eccles and his wife, Lori Davis, on this. So the whole deck is just sigils. And then it's designed for like ritual use, or you can use it for divination. It's a really versatile tool.
Are the
Um,
are the sigils on that one the way that the sigils are derived? Is that one from the like the Rosicrucian
Yeah, the Rose Cross.
flower?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a slightly different method.
Mhm.
Damien and I like to try to reduce the word down to as small as it possibly can be. So you might look at that Rose Cross and say, well, it looks like he's missing a couple of letters. And yes, that's deliberate. It's to try to condense the energy as to as small and specific a point as it can possibly be.
Nice. So you were like a psychic recruiter or something
Yeah.
in California? What
Yeah.
was up with all that?
Yeah. So I moved to California in 2008 to become an actor. I started acting professionally when I lived in Virginia when I was in the Navy, and decided to really try and make a career out of it. And my ex-wife, now ex-wife, her whole family lived just outside of Los Angeles in Orange County. So I moved to California and pursued acting professionally for about 6 years, 6 or 7 years. And I worked a lot, but never really made enough money to actually support myself. So after like 7 years of really struggling with money, I'm like, screw this. Who's got time for this? And decided to get like a real job. And I had never worked for corporate America before. It was such a novel idea to me. I thought it would be cool. And a friend of mine worked for this company called California Psychics. He was customer service for them. So they hired me, and I went in and, it's just answering phones all day, really. People have problems or want to buy time with a psychic or something like that. But in that company, I learned all about the business. Like I worked in that role for, I think, just under a year, and really learned, what do the customers want? What does the company offer? And so I ended up getting promoted from customer service to being a recruiter. It was my job to actually find people that had psychic abilities that wanted to work on this telephone line.
Sounds fun.
And yeah, it was a really cool, honestly, it was a very cool job.
Yeah.
I left because some of the things in the company itself changed, and I really didn't enjoy working there anymore. It became not a fun environment. But in general, yeah, it was a very fun job, really cool people. And the psychics themselves, they can be real pains in the butt, but in general, they're actually pretty cool people.
Did you have to develop like some sort of screening process to try to kind of filter out just like
Yeah. So
completely bogus people and stuff like that?
yeah, because there is a lot of that. So we had a process already was in place when I got there, and I came through and changed it completely. So I automated some of it. I found ways to automate some of that process and just sort of weed out the losers. And then my big contribution to the industry, I feel, is this rubric. It's like a 10-point rubric or 8-point rubric. And basically, you're grading, as you're getting the test reading, you're grading where the psychic falls in this rubric. And it's very easy. After it's over, you just count the points. It's either yes or no.
Mhm.
And, a lot of people ask me, like, for example, Jay Leno. Okay, so this building where this company was right in like the heart of the entertainment industry in Los Angeles. We were just down the street from Disney Studios and Universal Studios. So in our building were all these entertainment companies, and Jay Leno was a like common face there. And so we're out at the food trucks one day, me, Jay Leno, and the guy I was dating at the time. And he and Jay start talking, and Jay goes, "Wait, you guys work for that psychic company. You're scamming people, taking their money." So he wasn't a believer in this. But look, here's the reality. Our criteria was, did you feel better when you got off that call? Whether or not a person can actually tell the future with any degree of certainty, sometimes you're going to guess and get it right. Sometimes you'll really think that's what's going to happen and you get it wrong. Did the person feel better once they got off the call? Can they get through the rest of their day now when maybe they couldn't before? So part of it is offering the services of sort of a therapist for maybe people who can't really afford that or don't have access to it or just aren't comfortable with going through therapy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that sounds like it'd be fascinating. I bet every now and then you came across somebody that was some really interesting people.
You have absolutely no idea. Yeah, there are, because for domestic psychics, for psychics in the United States, I had a team of evaluators that would actually do those calls. And then for international psychics, I had to do them myself. So there was a guy based in Scotland, I think, England or Scotland, I can't remember which. This guy was incredible. I mean, we really say this, oh, he told me things that they could never know. This guy really could never have known that stuff. And it was just such an incredible reading. I got off that call and I was like, this might be the only real psychic reading I've ever gotten. And then the guy died. He did all these readings and he started to have all these health problems and then he died. And that was a big problem with our line. Yeah. The best psychics, the ones who seemed to have a real gift that everybody wanted to read with, a lot of them, it got to a point where we couldn't offer them more money to work more hours because their health couldn't handle it anymore. They had to stop. And then, we lost, while I worked there, I bet we lost at least 8 to 10 in the 3 or 4 years that I worked for that company.
Wow. I wonder if there's some kind of correlation between having that faculty opened up and health risks or something like that.
My guess is that they are not protecting themselves. You got to sort of put up an energetic screen between you and the person you're reading with, because otherwise you're taking on all their negativity. And let's get real. If people are calling a psychic hotline, their life probably isn't going great, right? They're having some kind of a crisis or something, and dealing with that for 3 or 4 hours every day, forget it. You're gonna have some problems.
Wow. Are you still into boxing?
Yeah. So I started training, I guess about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. I thought I knew what I was doing at first. And then I realized pretty quickly getting into a real gym with real coaches, like, no, I'm terrible at this. So it did a thing where I sort of broke myself down to the beginning and then built myself way back up. But yeah, I'm really getting very good at it, which is shocking for somebody my age. Because once you're over 40, let's get real, your body is just not what it was when you were younger.
My shoulder's been fucked up for like 3 weeks now. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. And imagine throwing jabs for hours and hours all day, just throwing jabs. It's all that shoulder work. So. Yeah.
But I guess it keeps you younger longer too. So.
It does. Yeah, it really keeps you in shape. It's great for cardio. It's great for burning all kinds of fat off your body. The only downside is, getting punched in the face. Most people don't like that. You gotta either decide you're going to be a boxer and you're going to get punched in the face quite a bit, or you're not really going to do that.
Yeah,
take it that seriously. My next fight's May 10th here. In a couple
sweet!
Months.
You got one coming up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How many have you done so far?
Well, I only did one last year. I was going to do a bunch, and then I ended up getting really sidetracked with my life in Brazil. So I just did one fight.
That's exciting. Good luck on that. I hope it goes well.
Thanks.
All right. So West Arctica. This is fascinating. You have essentially attempted to establish your own country or something along these lines. Tell me what's up with that.
Well, I didn't attempt to do it. I did it.
You did it. Okay.
In 2001, I was in the military. I was an intelligence analyst, and part of my job was foreign country and military capability and capabilities. So I spent a lot of time studying the politics and the militaries of foreign countries. And I was reading through this website called the CIA World Factbook, and there was an article on Antarctica, and it said there are no claims in this particular section of Western Antarctica. And I thought about it for a second. I thought, well, nobody wants it. Well, I'll take it. So, I did more research on it. I started to understand how the Antarctic Treaty works and some other things about the peculiar legal situation of Antarctica. And so I figured, I think I can do this. So I sent letters out to like 9 world governments and the United Nations saying, hey, I'm taking this section of Antarctica for myself. And nobody ever challenged me. So I've been ruling it as an independent country for the last, what are we at now, 25 years.
I like your style. That's awesome. How does one become a citizen?
It's real easy. You just go to the website, fill out the form.
That's cool. Yeah. So like
we also have titles of nobility. That's really what people enjoy.
Oh, yeah,
we have knighthoods. Yeah.
So are you following? Yeah, it's like a particular model of structure that you've gravitated toward. What would that be like?
It's
like...
very similar to the United Kingdom, but our government is sort of set up like the government of Monaco. Because I wanted to look. We're not as big as the United Kingdom, obviously. In terms of the population, we have a very small population. I think it's 2,500 people right now or somewhere around that. So closer to something like Monaco. So our general government structure is sort of mirrors theirs in a lot of ways. But in terms of the knighthoods and the nobility, it's very closely mirroring the United Kingdom.
Nice. And geographically, in terms of the location, how broad of a chunk of area does it encompass?
It is absolutely massive. So it is approximately the size of California, Oregon, and Washington State all together.
Wow. And
so
is it like...
But it's all barren. It's just like ice and there's some rock. That's about it.
Yeah. Interesting. There's still got to be
negative 40 degrees like year round. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, it's a tough sell, but who knows? Maybe it'll thaw out a little bit and be more conducive to
hospitable. Yeah. Hey, if the cool thing is, obviously I don't want. So we incorporated in 2014. So West Arctica became West Arctica Incorporated, and it's now a nonprofit 501c3, registered with the IRS and everything, devoted to advocating for Western Antarctica. So that's really we shifted our focus from my ego of wanting to own something to actually, how can we do some good for the world? Because otherwise, why was I doing it as an adult? It just didn't make any sense. So we obviously don't want that to happen. We want to try to preserve the ice caps of the polar regions. However, if it did all melt, there's a scientific process called isostatic rebound. There's actually land underneath the ice sheet. So as the ice melts, that weight all comes off, and the land, the plates actually will come up, rise up out of the water. So anywhere there's mountains in Antarctica right now, those would all become like islands in the future. And so it would be kind of cool. I'd go from owning this like frozen wasteland to owning like a whole bunch of island property. It could be kind of cool.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I've heard this thing. I don't know if this is like still valid or what, but that I guess the countries all have some sort of treaty that they agree that Antarctica is like I don't know if it's like a non-conflict zone or like do you know what I'm talking about? There's like some Antarctic treaty thing.
Yeah. So that's exactly what it's called. So the Antarctic Treaty was signed, I think, in the 50s or 40s. I think it was actually the 40s. All the countries that had any dealings in Antarctica at that time signed this treaty, and it prevents any new claims from being made. It prevents any military operations whatsoever, which has actually kept Antarctica like imagine Russian and I'm talking Soviet Russian, okay? Russian and American scientists operating side by side in Antarctica. And if one were to have a problem, they could actually get on the radio and say, hey, can you come help me? And they would render assistance. So that kind of peaceful usage of Antarctica. Oh, and also they can't mine any minerals. You can't do any kind of large scale, coal. There's a lot of coal there. There's a lot of oil there under the ground, under the ice, and in the oceanic crust. But you can't mine for any of that stuff. That's part of the treaty. So yeah, it's actually an incredible example of international peace down there.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm getting this confused. Have you ever heard of, I think it was Operation High Jump. I don't know if that was the name of it. I
Yeah.
think it had to do with the area of Antarctica or something, but like it's kind of this mysterious story. I don't know. I was curious what you thought about that. If there's any
So
legitimacy to it.
so there are some mysteries in Antarctica, but there's also a lot of like conspiracy theory type
The
stuff.
ice wall.
So yeah, so I think you're probably referring to Robert Byrd flew
Oh
an
yeah, Admiral
airplane.
Byrd. That's what it was.
Yeah, Admiral Byrd, or Richard Byrd. Why did I say Robert? Richard Byrd flew an airplane over the South Pole. He was the first person to do that. He also flew an airplane over the North Pole. So that was like a big deal. Hey, congratulations. But then after he died, years later, his diary was found. And he put all this stuff in this diary that was like, well, we flew over the South Pole, but we went into this hole that took us inside inner Earth. And talked about the people, and they have this bizarre technology and they're like really enlightened and all this other stuff. But I don't think any of that's true. I mean, there's been scientists at the South Pole for like, I don't know what, 100 years now almost. And all over Antarctica. It's been thoroughly mapped and covered, and no one's found any holes to the inner Earth. And so I don't really think that's true. I think the diary is probably a hoax, but that's just my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's other stuff to it as well. Besides just the Admiral Byrd story, there was some story about the people that went over there coming into contact with some sort of, I don't know, entities or like phenomena of some sort and being like and some sort of fight or confrontation with them. A guy that I've gotten to know 10 years or so. He's a super tactical guy. He's like trained with the Secret Service, and his mother was MI5, and his dad was an Air Force guy, and that's how they met or something. But he says that his mom was involved in this Operation High Jump thing in some capacity. I don't know. He's a pretty like serious guy. Who knows? It's just interesting to think about. So, I wanted to ask you about your like anti-terrorism and force protection work.
Okay.
What's that
Yeah.
like?
Oh, geez. So you really are going to go off on other topics I wasn't
I am, yeah.
anticipating. Okay.
Yeah, I want to know.
So, yeah, when I was in the Navy, the reason my life is, I think, so interesting to people is because it doesn't seem to make any sense. Like you can't say, well, he did that and it led to this and it led to that and it led to that. And that's how I got to where I am today. That's not the way I've lived my life. For a lot of my life, I allow myself to like be open to new ideas and inspiration. And when I get it in my heart, I just go for it. Like basically arranging to be fired from my job and then just going into a new company that had nothing to do with what I was doing before. So I had been training as an actor and working as an actor before I joined the Navy. And in late 2000, year 2000, I was really unhappy in college, and just didn't feel like I was contributing to the world in a meaningful way as an actor. So I read this biography about Napoleon and decided I wanted to join the military. It was literally that simple. And then walked into the recruiter and said, hey, I want to join the Navy. Because at that time, the Navy was the only service. This is before September 11th. The Navy was the only service that was really deploying overseas and doing all this cool stuff. And plus, James Bond was Commander Bond. And so I thought, well, intel is what I knew I wanted to do. I already knew a lot about terrorism for a variety of reasons before I joined the Navy, which is, again, kind of strange. But so I get into the Navy, I'm an intel analyst, and terrorism was my specialty. I had an ability to analyze terrorist groups and terrorist activity from the point of view of the terrorist. So I wasn't thinking about what they were doing the way a normal analyst would. I was thinking about it like a terrorist would. And that was really my strength and how I was able to like really see what was coming around the corner. It wasn't psychic. It was just being able to analyze a certain set of activities and know what was going to happen as a result of that. So during Operation Iraqi, I joined right before September 11th. That's how sure I was. I knew something was coming. I could just sense it. I just knew there was about to be something really big happening in the United States that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to already be out there when it happened. So September 11th occurred. I was in Turkey when that happened. Okay, I was actually sitting off the coast. We just pulled out of Marmaris, Turkey, and I remember that I was asleep because I'd been working night duty, and the captain came over the 1MC and gave this announcement telling us what had happened, and I already knew who did it. Wow. Imagine that. The morning of September 11th, I already knew there was only one or two organizations that could have pulled that off. It was either Al-Qaeda or the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. And as it turns out, it was both of them working together. So I just went up, I'll never forget, they came down, they got me out of my rack and took me upstairs. I put together a little packet that I already had on those two organizations. I said, listen, it was one of these two. When you brief the captain, just tell him it was one of them. So that ended up being the truth.
Wow. Have you come across, or I'm sure you probably have some opinions about this, people say there was other intelligence agencies involved, like the Mossad perhaps, or things like along these lines that were helping facilitate, obviously there's all kinds of stuff with the 9/11 stuff, but
right.
I don't know if that's for you. You're just like, absolutely not. Or if you have any additional commentary on it.
So, hey, I am always happy to listen to conspiracy theories. During Operation Iraqi Freedom and just after that, I actually did a report that said Osama bin Laden is probably hiding in Shangri-La, like the mythical city under the Himalayas. Okay, I actually gave that report at a classified level, secret, no foreign, to everybody in my intel office. And afterwards, the ship's intel officer said, "Is he drunk? Is this for real? Is this like for April Fools or something?" He could not believe I had actually put that report and gave it. So I'm open to all kinds of unusual ideas. However, if you look at what Al-Qaeda and the Egyptian Islamic Jihad were doing for the 10 years before September 11th, you will see a very clear escalation in their tactical capabilities and their operational capabilities and in their what's what I'm looking for here, like their brazenness in their attacks. Okay, there's a definite increase in that leads up to the events of September 11th, and the proof really is in the pudding. I taught anti-terrorism. After I left the ship that I was on, where I was an analyst, then I went to be a teacher in the Intel school in Virginia Beach, and I taught anti-terrorism. So I always tell people that the September 11th attacks are the most successful terrorist attacks in the history of humanity. And they say, oh, because of the people that were killed or the damage that was done. No, absolutely not. It's because those attacks got a lot of people to look at Islam. Wait, what's Islam? What's the Quran? I don't even, Americans didn't even know. And people in the West in general didn't even think about Islam. So after September 11th, the number one fastest growing religion became Islam. And the number of Quran sales went through the roof. So that was always the goal of September 11th. The goal of a terrorist attack is not to kill people. It's not to cause damage. It's not to earn money for themselves. Those are just secondary things. The goal is to push forward your ideology, whatever that ideology is. So because of that, September 11th is definitely the most successful terrorist attack ever. So you look at that, you say, what was the outcome? Well, they got what they wanted. They really got what they were aiming for. So that should reassure people that, this wasn't necessarily an inside job from the United States and everything else. Look, Dick Cheney was going to make a shitload of money as vice president anyways. He didn't need to invade Iraq to do that. He was going to find a way to get the companies that he owned stock in to have some bigger government contracts than they otherwise would have.
True that. Yeah. So did your work as an intelligence specialist go hand in hand with the anti-terrorism stuff, or was it a little bit different? Or
Yeah, no, it was the same thing. It was part of my daily job.
yeah, that seems like it would be fun. I don't know a whole lot about it. It just seems interesting. What's the work environment like? What's the day to day like?
So the day to day actually involves, ironically, being an intelligence analyst got me ready for the job that I do now, for the work that I'm doing now, because a lot of it's research. So you're spending most of your day collecting information. And when you have a security clearance, you're able to access lots of different kinds of information. Like you can get classified imagery, you can get OSINT, which would be open source intelligence, but then you've also got human reports coming in. You've got all these electronic reports coming in. So I'll give you an example. Part of my job was to sit and look at radio traffic, just what is going out over the radio between different ports or peers, what's going on anywhere in the world. And I found there was a radio report that mentioned the harbor master in this port in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, someplace like that. And I Googled that guy's name, and then I did a little more research on him. And I was able to find out he's like a third cousin of Osama bin Laden. So now we have a guy who's potentially associated with terrorists operating the port at this really sensitive port facility in the Middle East. So I put those two together, and now it's not my job to act on that. Okay, I can't just, like in the movies, grab a gun and now I'm going to go fight that guy. It's not really the way it works. You hand that off to somebody else at the national or regional level, and then it's their job to decide to act on it. And I'll tell you what, we ended up not pulling into that pier. We had to go to Bahrain instead to get our antenna fixed, instead of going into Abu Dhabi. So whether that little tiny piece of intel I found actually did lead them to that guy and said, "Hey, we're going to arrest you and shut down U.S. operations here for a little bit," or not, who can say for sure? But that's just one example. It's about collecting as much information as possible, analyzing it from a critical point of view, and then passing on a recommendation to the actual decision makers.
Does signals intelligence tie into that as well, or is it like a separate area?
Absolutely. Nope. SIGINT. So I was an operational intelligence specialist. That was my job. So OpIntel is everything. We literally look at any kind of information that we can obtain and then cram it all together and say, okay, what's the actual message here? What's actually being going to be done in the future?
With this modern day, obviously we have all kinds of technologies and signals, and there's just so much. So I'm curious, from having your background and experience, were you able to get an understanding of more obscure things like microwave weapon technologies, or like Raytheon and some of these other companies have developed these like really robust, they're like these electronic warfare type weapons. And I don't know if that comes into your work or your view at all, but have you been exposed to that stuff at all?
So not the weapons side of it, but from an intelligence collection side of it, yes. Using, I'm not going to call them weapons because they really aren't, but energy devices, shall we say, to obtain pieces of information that we as civilians could not even comprehend that this could be possible.
Wow.
So here's just an example. So you're in your office, you're on your computer, you're typing and looking at information on your screen, and it's a closed system. It's very secure. Nobody can get into it. It doesn't even have a modem on it, let's say. It's just your computer. A skilled spy with the right equipment can actually read the heat signature on your window and see, using these devices, and see what is being typed on your screen.
Wow.
Because think about a computer screen is going to be all white with black letters. So that's going to give off a different light signature and different heat. And they can do that through like a closed window where they're not visually seeing what's on the screen. They're just getting the heat that is coming off of that screen. And even scarier stuff to me is like, now let's put that in technology into a satellite, and we can do that anywhere in the world. And the United States and Russia and China probably now have that technology. They can actually take a paint swatch off anything in the whole world, a car, a boat, a submarine, whatever it is, and you can go change the configuration of this vessel or ship or car or whatever it is, and they'll still know that the original paint that was on there is under there someplace, and they've got a signature that remembers that's what that paint signature is, and it's unique to that car or that ship or that. And so no matter what you try to do to hide it, you will never be able to hide it ever, because there's a satellite overhead that can read that paint signature. That to me is like terrifying, but that's real tech. That technology has been around for like 30 years. So imagine what they're doing now, because I've been out of the Navy almost 20 years.
Yeah, it's wild. I had an uncle who he had some sort of job where he worked in some capacity with some intelligence agency. He said basically his job was to deliver messages. That's like all he would say or whatever.
Yeah.
But he would go to visit friends, he would travel, and in the midst of his travels, they would go to different places. And one of them was Memwith Hill. I think it's in the UK somewhere. But
Yeah.
so I kind of became privy to like these radome stations, and there's like the Five Eyes network where they correspond, like, one will correspond with like Pine Gap in Australia or something, and they kind of share intelligence and all this stuff. And he was telling me that, and this is like an old thing, so yeah, like you said, who knows what they have now, but they used to have it to where anytime if certain words were said on a telephone line, it would trigger a recording. And then, so if there was like, if you're using it for anti-terrorist purposes or things along these lines, it would kind of sift out and collect these data points on different calls, organize them, send them over to, somebody to look at them and listen to them. And I was like, damn, it's just crazy to think of all the possible technologies that we have no idea what the capabilities are. It's almost like anything could be possible. Being able to access certain types of data and things like this, were you ever able to look at any like strange phenomena, or is that like in a different section? Do you have that compartmentalized somewhere else? Or?
It is, some of it is compartmentalized, but before I joined the military, I had a real interest in paranormal phenomena, Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, all that kind of stuff. So before I joined the Navy, I already knew, like, I knew a lot about Area 51. I knew a lot about some of these UFO crashes, like Roswell, New Mexico, but there's a lesser known one that happened in Pennsylvania, Kecksburg. It's right outside of Pittsburgh. So I'd actually gone to Kecksburg when I was like, I don't know, 18 or 19 years old, and like interviewed some of the locals that saw things. And so the trick to accessing these systems is knowing the questions to ask. So, for example, I'll just use Kecksburg as the example because it's like one I know a lot about. So the question on Kecksburg is, was it a UFO, was it a meteor, or was it a Russian space probe? Why would the government show up to pull something out of this field or this ditch where it crashed and take it away underneath the tarp? Well, it was either a UFO or a Russian space probe, because they wouldn't do that with a meteor, I don't think. So was it a Russian space probe? Well, if you know where to look, we have classified documents that give the status for every single space probe that Russia launched. Not just space probes, but their rockets, their satellites, everything they put up in the sky. I found this document. It's classified, secret, no foreign. It's got everything from like Sputnik all the way up to whatever the present day was. So you just go to 1965. That's when the crash was. And the crash was, I don't remember the exact month, but I knew it then. So you go to the month, that time period. Okay, well, there's only 3 that it could have possibly been. There were 3 launches in that area, let's say, and all of them are accounted for. That means it was not a Russian space probe under that cloth. So what did they bring out? Wasn't a Russian space probe? Wasn't a meteor? That only leaves us the third option,
Wow.
something extraterrestrial. So you can, but again, that's that analytical skill. You've got to sort of know what you're looking for before you try and go in and find it.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. Okay. As far as your magical workings, your experience with angels, demons, just entities, do you have any? Have you ever had any really interesting experiences, phenomenologically or like impactful spiritual experiences that you feel like might be interesting and noteworthy?
You know, you do this work long enough, you're going to have, I think, experiences that are difficult to explain. A lot of interesting stuff, but nothing that maybe would be totally out of the ordinary for a person who has done this work before. Um, the, the point, I will tell you, the point that I knew that it was real, that there was something to it, that it wasn't just made up mumbo jumbo, was I was creating the occult tarot, the original version, and I was trying to figure out what the card for the demon Andrus should look like. And Andrus is a really dangerous demon. His only task is to like kill people. And he's an angel, a body of an angel with an owl head riding on like this sort of demonic creature. And he carries a big sword. So in trying to figure out what the card should look like, I was really struggling with it. And I was going back and looking over all these different texts that I had seen written about Andrus and working with his sigil and manipulating the sigil to fit on the card and things like that. So I create the card. I spent probably 2 or 3 hours working on it. I go to bed. It's really late by that point. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning. And in the darkness of my bedroom, there is this silhouette that looks just like Andrus, just like the image of Andrus, right? But it's like just a dark silhouette sort of by the door in kind of the corner of the room. And here's where I knew it was real. I didn't feel afraid because I had done all this work with Andrus. I understood how these demons operate. As long as you don't come to them in a negative way, they're not going to bring negativity to you. The problem is most people bring negativity to them. So I see Andrus there, and I also knew like they respond well to courage. If you're strong, you don't feel any fear when you encounter these entities, then they'll back down before you back down. So I didn't do or say anything. I didn't have to. I just looked at him. I didn't feel any fear. There was obviously that moment of apprehension there, but after that, I closed my eyes and went back to sleep, and that was it. I never saw. That was the only time I ever actually saw any like manifestation in front of me.
Oh, actually, I just answered my question in my head. I was gonna say, did you do like a license to depart thing? But you were saying you were working on the tarot card, so it wasn't like you were doing like a.
I did not do an actual invocation. Now I did play with his sigil, so that is probably what called him down. But yeah,
man, that's wild. It would probably freak me out, but yeah, that's just me. There was a cool way that I was listening to you. You were describing kind of how you work with, say, like the 72 angels. If somebody is looking at for their personal selves, and I think you were describing there's like 3 angels that govern certain aspects of an individual. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit and explain how that works.
So the doctrine that 3 angels govern each person, or that each person has 3 angels which govern them, actually dates back to Agrippa was really the first author to write about it extensively. And then A.E. Waite, the author of the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, he also wrote about it. So it's an old doctrine. It goes back pretty far, but a lot of people don't really understand it. The 3 angels come from the 72 angels of the Shem HaMephorash. And it's based on 3 different moments of your birth: the time that you were born, the day that you were born, and then a day range of 5 days if you were born anywhere in those 5 days. So it's 3 different angels that govern 3 different aspects of your life. And the interesting thing about that is, well, where the hell did Agrippa get it? Because you really don't see much literature about that specific system pre-Agrippa, but he obviously got the source from someplace. So in my desire to know the answer to this, pushing back further and further, it actually comes from the Egyptian concept of the decans. They believed that the different stars in the sky were individual gods, and they had a set of really 73 or 76, but it's 36 in the course of a year, and then 76 is they need to adjust them for their calendar, of these angels or stars, really stellar gods, in the sky that govern over human interactions. And the interesting thing is, they didn't just believe that whoever was in the sky that night is doing all the governing. It was based on really two different things: the date and the hour of the night, or the hour of the day. Because the Egyptians understood during the day, the stars aren't just gone, they don't disappear. And when certain stars aren't above the horizon, they aren't just invisible, they aren't just gone. They are still interacting with human beings. So their system of astrology actually accounted for these multiple points in the sky where these different stars are. So when a person was born at that exact moment, you had multiple decanal gods ruling over you and influencing you from that period forward. And they had a whole chart. They had this down to really a science, where they could chart out your entire life, every star, where it was going to be for the whole rest of your life, as long as you lived, who was going to be ruling over you and what their influence was going to be at any particular moment for the rest of your life. It was really an incredible system that people just don't really understand or care about, because it was incorporated by the Greeks into the Hellenistic astrology and the Babylonian astrology. So we sort of lost where it came from. People use it today, they understand it, they just don't understand the origin of it, where it really came from. So yeah, that idea that multiple spirits, astrologically or celestial spirits, whatever you would call them, are all impacting you at one time, at any given moment, regardless of whether they're actually present in the sky or not, is actually an Egyptian idea.
Wow. It's kind of like everyone has like a triangulation of these decanic angels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so could you describe again, like, how do you describe a deacon? What exactly is a deacon?
So the decan, that's a word that has been adopted by Hermetic magicians, and it doesn't exactly mean what it originally meant to the Egyptians, because the Egyptians didn't call them decans. The Greeks called them decans. Mm-hmm. So from an Egyptian perspective, let me start with that, and then we'll work our way to what it is now. They have 36 weeks in their calendar. Mm-hmm. So the Egyptian calendar is broken into 36 weeks. Each one is 10 days. That's 360 days. Now, to us, we say, well, wait, there's 365 days in a year. We'll come to that in a minute. But 360 is also the number of degrees in a circle. So they have 360 days, 36 weeks of 10 days each. That's what that word decan is, actually those 10 days. So the Egyptians had a specific god that ruled over each 10-day period in their calendar. And these were what the Greeks called minor gods, daimons, Daimons, minor gods, because they weren't Osiris, they weren't Horus, they weren't Ra or Isis, the big gods, the important ones. So these 36 gods were actually individual stars or astral systems in the sky. For example, the stars of Orion. Orion, that constellation was called Shah or Sa by the Egyptians, and they broke it into multiple parts. So the arm of Shah was one, the head or body of Shah was another, and then the other arm of Shah. Because if you look at it as it's moving through the night sky through the course of the night, that's the way it comes over the horizon, rises in the sky, and then sets at night over the course of a year. So it wouldn't be the whole constellation of Shah. It would be Shah's arm or Shah's body or Shah's other arm was ruling on that particular week. So that's where the concept of 36 decans really comes from. And again, it was the Greeks who named them decans, deca. The Hermeticists, as they were trying to incorporate that Egyptian system with their own Hellenic system and the Babylonian system, basically stripped a lot of that stuff away and created, we still have these decans, but they decided to give rulership to the planets. So, each decan now has a planet that rules over it or an astrological sign. So you got Aries, and they said, okay, well, if we break each of the 12 zodiac signs into 3 sections and give each one its own ruler, that'll get us to the number 36, and we can sort of preserve this Egyptian system in a way. But they lost the most important part, which is the stars themselves. And what really sucks is, like, we know that this was the Egyptian system, but we can't say 100% for sure what the stars were. There's some stars we know for sure. Like, for example, Sirius. Sirius was really highly revered by the Egyptians as the decan or goddess Sopdet. And then there's a couple others, like the Pleiades. The Pleiades were called the Thousands. That was the actual Egyptian name for the decan of the Pleiades was the Thousands. And of course, the stars of Shah, which are the constellation Orion and those various stars. So there's some that we do know, but if the fucking Hermeticists had just remembered that information, write down the name of the stars so we know them. Like Egyptologists today, I read, oh my God, probably close to 100 scientific papers written by Egyptologists about Egyptian astronomy and astrology. And like, nobody can really agree on which star was which and which god aligns with which star. And like, if we just knew that information, the whole system would be perfect. We'd have it. We could use it every day.
So are there Egyptian texts that list the names of the decans, but we just don't know what particular star sets they're corresponded to?
Because what the hell is Alpha Centauri? What the hell is the Pleiades? That's what we call them today.
Yeah.
But what did they call them? They called them Sopdet or whatever. So there's a couple that we know for sure. Like I said, Sopdet and Sirius, but that's like it. Yeah. And the constellation Saw and a few others. But for the most part, and even scientists argue like, well, I think that one's Mars because they said it's red. It's not fucking Mars, you idiot. But that's the minority opinion of scientists. So yeah, because we know what their names were. We know generally in the year when they would have been in the sky. But go out and look at the sky tonight and tell me which star is which. Like, there's a lot of stars to choose from. So what you try to do is say, well, which would have been the brightest star, highest in the sky, or coming in its heliacal rise in that particular period of the year in ancient Egypt. And you can sort of get like, okay, we got 3 stars, this one could be, So there's work being done to try to give scientists the best guess at it. And that's what I did in my book, Cult of the Stars. I sort of took my best guess, but we'll probably never know with any certainty.
What do people use? Like, what are some of the best Egyptian source texts that we can glimpse some of this information from? Well,
that's the problem. There aren't any. The source texts are actually coffin lids.
Oh, okay.
So when I did this research, I had to physically go to Egypt into the freaking tombs in the desert of Asut in the Western Desert and look at the tombs themselves to understand what the coffin lid names even meant. And then you can go to the Egyptian Museum and look at the coffin lids and see the way the stars are lined out. The hieroglyphic names are on there. That's why it's really difficult to study this stuff, because there isn't like a book you can go read. You have to go read books that were written by Egyptologists that describe these coffin lids.
What were some of your favorite parts about your trip in Egypt or your trips? Do you have any sites that were like
all of it?
Awesome?
It was all pretty cool. Pretty cool, all of it. So I went in 2021 when the COVID lockdown had just been lifted. So there was like nobody else there. The country was barely even open to outsiders. So imagine if you've never been to Egypt, you can't really conceive what it's like to be in the pyramid when it's empty, the Great Pyramid, when there's nobody else in there. Generally, it's crammed with tourists. They try to get as many people as they can, or the Valley of the Kings. To go to these places and have nobody else there was like awesome. Well, that's an experience I could never have ever again. But, you know, I planned my itinerary going to these really remote tombs out in the middle of nowhere that I needed to see for my research. So that to me was like the coolest part. For example, these tombs in Asut, the near monumental tombs, we were the first Westerners to go there in like 5 or 6 years. So we had to like literally scrape sand away that had piled up in front of the doors of these tombs to get into them. And the first tomb we went in, there was not any light. There was no functioning light. So I had to, thank God I brought a flashlight because nobody else had one. And again, people hadn't been in, like those doors hadn't been opened in a really long time. So to have that kind of an experience was just, and I had already read all these scientific papers about them. They'd been written in like the 20s or 30s. And then to go see it in person and know exactly what I was looking for. Yes, that's it. I found it. That experience to me was really, really important.
Oh man, that's badass. Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. It's surprising. It's still so surprising that that can be the case where some of these tombs have just not been accessed for such long periods of time. It's just like, dang. But I guess they're
Because
always
they're off the beaten path. That's part of it. Is that they're not the main tourist sites where tourists want to go and see. The pyramids, obviously, but Luxor, Karnak. They want to go see the Abu Simbel, where the gigantic statues of Ramses are. They want to go see that kind of stuff. That's what the basic tourist wants. Basic tourists would have gone in these tombs that I went into, and they wouldn't even understand what they were looking at. It really would make no sense to them. To me, it was like, oh my God, this is the secrets of the universe are on the wall of this tomb. Why aren't you people more excited? But they just don't see it that way. The pretty colors is what they're interested. Really colorful tombs and things like
so
that, or
big.
temples are
Yeah.
what's popular. Yeah.
Back to these.
So did I explain the decans? Okay. So
Yeah, sort of, but
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, because I think it has like something to do with like a birth time, then a birthday, and then like how you determine the individual.
3 angels. One is based on your birth time. One is based on your birthday, and then another one is based on that span of 5 days. 5 days that the angel rules over. So one is going to be your physical guardian. One is your soul guardian, and the other one is your
Immoral.
I'm blanking. Yeah, moral guardian. That's right. Which is helping you like make good choices in your life is really what it's about. So yeah, the idea is you figure out who those 3 angels are, and then that's who you can work with most closely. You can work with anybody, but why not work with these 3 that are most carefully aligned with you based on the day you were born? And it's sort of the same thing with a demon. Each person has a demon that sort of ruled over that 5-day period when they were born. Try to align yourself with that particular spirit if you're going to work with any demon. And this isn't always true, but I found it to be somewhat true, that you can look at what those angels' characteristics are, like what they influence or what they rule over, and it generally fits in with the kind of person that you are. So, for example, one of my angels deals with military stuff, and I was in the military.
Wow.
And another one of them deals
That's
with
crazy.
political stuff, and for a long time, I was really interested in politics. I thought I was going to be a politician, but look at me, I rule my own country as the Grand Duke.
There you go.
So, okay, so yeah, they do tend to align with you, but that's not always the case.
Yeah. There was something where you were explaining, because this is a question that I had before, but I haven't had answered, that Malachim text, I think is what it is. And you were describing the way somehow it comes from the stars or something like that.
Okay, so there are 3 or 4 different magical alphabets. really more fonts of Hebrew. Malachim is more or less a way of drawing Hebrew characters than it is really its own alphabet, because every symbol corresponds directly to a letter in Hebrew. So the general concept, as I understand it, of how this alphabet was created was you have a Kabbalistic astronomer or astrologer one night is out looking at the stars and is locating where they believe the energy of particular letters come from. Let's say the letter Elf, Aleph, the letter A in the Hebrew alphabet. And let's say they think it's there, okay? So what they did then was like do a little connect the dots with the stars in that area, and that became that letter in Malachim.
Wow. Where does
And
the
they did,
Malachim
then they
originate?
did that for all of them. I don't actually know. Agrippa is the earliest source that I'm aware of, but obviously he got it from someplace else because he has three or four magical alphabets in his 3 books of occult philosophy. Yeah. So all those alphabets generally were created from that process or a similar process to that.
Man, that's so cool. Okay, what are some of your personal favorite texts, books on, esoteric subject matters?
Well, probably 2 of the most useful are Damien Eccles' book, High Magic, and Ritual, which he wrote with Laurie just a couple of years ago. So those 2 books, High Magic is a great book. If you don't have it, you've never read it, it's great because all those old like Latin texts that I had to go through and translate to understand how to do rituals and things, he's got it for you right there in English. It's really easy. And he relates it in a way that anybody can figure out how to do this magical work. It demystifies a lot of the magical work, to be honest. And that's why I recommend High Magic to everybody. It simplified that reading his book simplified my magical practice in a lot of ways. Before then I put this like heavy gravitas on every ritual I did, and now I can crank out 2 or 3 of the lesser banishing rituals of the pentagram a day, and it doesn't really have that heavy weight that it had before. It's more of a cleansing experience. So his 2 books were really important. And then, to be honest, I'm reading a lot of the old original texts. So the original Key of Solomon in Latin, I find more value in that than in later authors' interpretations of it. But, Crowley's Liber 777, that's like a reference text for me. I probably go to that, once or twice a week when I'm working on a project, almost every day. Liber 77 is a really powerful book. I think it's maybe misutilized or underutilized by a lot of magicians in the community. But to me, it's like the gold standard for magical texts. And then A.E. Waite's Book of Ceremonial Magic, originally published as Book of Black Magic and Pacts. I think that's a really beneficial book. He's got some mistakes in there. It's interesting to me to get to a level where I can now look back and say, you screwed that name up, or you actually reversed those 2 or whatever, to find mistakes in these. I mean, look, A.E. Waite was like a titan of occultism, and to find mistakes he made gives me a little bit of pride in myself that I can catch things like that.
What are some questions that that come from all of your studies that you wish you had answers to, or you hope may be revealed, or maybe when you're going through stuff, you're like identifying things and you're like, I wish there was more information on this or that, anything like that?
The Egyptian stuff was really challenging for me. So I wrote this book, Cult of the Stars, back in 2021, and created an oracle deck to go with it. And I was really disappointed by the occult knowledge that was published about Egyptian magic and Egyptian astrology. It's all garbage. It's like, not all of it, but like 90% of it is trash. And people are just making it up really as they go along. saying, oh, well, Isis ruled over that and Osiris ruled over that. And none of that's true. Um, they're doing this because they didn't bother to translate the German text. A lot of Egyptology is actually done in German. So you got to figure out a way to get it in English or translate it from the German yourself. So I had to really rely on scientific papers. And unfortunately, the science community, the academic community, completely disavows itself of anything touching astrology, occultism, magic, any of that. So yeah, I had to learn to like not be insulted by the way they're talking about people like me. Pyramidiates is what they call us, which I guess there's some truth to that. But I was really disappointed by the lack of real, authentic occult information about ancient Egypt. It's mostly trash. But I was able to find the information I needed, and most of it's there. So other mysteries now that I'm still trying to solve. There's some Kabbalah stuff that I got involved with, digging into, and actually Mark Stavish helped point me in a direction that was really productive with regard to the shadow spheres of the tree of life, the Kippolith. I call them Kippolith, but I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Clip off or something.
Yeah, clip off. Yeah.
I don't know if that's right. But...
It's somewhere in there. Yeah. So he pointed me in a really productive direction to be able to study them without having to work on them, because working with them is extremely dangerous. Studying them is, I can read a document about landmines without stepping on a landmine. Yeah. That's kind of the way I look at it. So there's a lot more to that. Again, the modern occult literature about that phenomenon is crap. It's almost all garbage. To get to the good stuff, what are you going to learn how to read Hebrew? Like, even I can't do that very well.
I'm working on
it. Right. It's a struggle. That was my birthday present to myself last year. I hired a Hebrew tutor. So it's really a struggle to do that. You've got to really be committed to it. So yeah, stuff about the Clipoth or Kippolith, as I call them, to know more about that and get a deeper understanding of it is sort of where my work is taking me right now, but not to the degree where I actually have any interest in working with them. I really think the landmine analogy is perfect because I think there's signposts saying, hey, there's a landmine there, don't step on it. Well, if you see a big skull and crossbones saying there's a landmine, you don't run over to that. You just know it's there. You can stay away from it.
Yeah. Do you have any upcoming projects or anything?
Yeah, always. I'm always working 2 and 3 projects ahead. So this year I am releasing an occult guide to the tarot. This is a critical examination of every single tarot card. I use several different decks in the book, so you get to see pictures of the cards through the course of their development from the Italian decks to the modern decks. And then really digging into every single card. This includes the minor arcana. Like, what was the 2 of diamonds when it was a playing card? How does that translate to the 2 of pentacles in the tarot? And where do those meanings come from? And who decided what those meanings are? And how those meanings evolve and change throughout the course of the existence of the tarot. So that's what the book is. It's filled with lots and lots of pictures, but it's also filled with tons of research that I have done. Everything I learned about the tarot before I made my first deck is basically in this book.
You're applying your analytical skills.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And understanding, to me, the biggest takeaway on this book is really understanding why the tarot was created. How did we go? This is a question nobody even asks. Why did we go from playing cards in Italy in the early 1400s? They had playing cards. And all of a sudden, someone said, playing cards aren't good enough. I need to have 22 or however many trump cards added in. Why? Why did they do that? What was the significance? What was the reason? And by answering that question, I was able to answer the whole reason for the existence of the tarot. So an occult guide to the tarot, it's coming out from Rockpool Publishing, Simon & Schuster in September. And then the other project that I'm working on right now is the Baphomet Tarot. I don't know if you can see that. So this is a tarot deck devoted entirely to Baphomet. It's on Kickstarter right now. You can get to the link just by either going to Kickstarter, typing in Baphomet Tarot, or just go to my website and it'll link from there. But the concept is, it took a lot of work because, Baphomet is really one image created by Levi back in the 1800s. So how do I make a whole damn tarot deck out of that? Well, what I did was explored the whole breadth of Baphomet, from the Knights Templar and even beyond that into the Egyptian goat worship, the goat of Mendes. So start with that, move up to the Knights Templar, and then up to even modern Hermeticists and modern Satanists. So how everybody has adopted and adapted the Baphomet symbol to their own philosophies, and how it works with all those different philosophies. And I try to tell the story of that through the cards of the tarot. It's been really hard, honestly, but it's a really cool deck. It's a really cool deck.
It makes me want to ask you what your assessment is, or your take on Baphomet. I don't know if that's like a loaded question because it's kind of broad, but yeah, I mean, how do you interpret it as a symbol? What does it mean to you?
So to me, the concept of the unity of opposites is really what Baphomet's all about. To use it almost like a thought form. I watched an interview you did with somebody, and you mentioned tulpas or thought forms, and I really do view Baphomet as like that. If you can sit and meditate on it and sort of bring it into your consciousness, not as an invocation or anything like that, just meditating on the concept of Baphomet, I think you can try to come to a more holistic version of yourself, a sort of better version of yourself.
Yeah, man. Well, you've done a lot of cool stuff. You're a fascinating human.
Thanks. Thanks.
I appreciate you taking the time. Where would you direct people to find out more about yourself, or point them to locate your offerings, your tarot decks, your books, all of this stuff?
So you can buy just about all my decks and books on my website, bloodstone.info. That's the Bloodstone Studios website. If you just want to learn more about me, see a bunch of pictures of me with my shirt off, it is travismchenry.com. Fun fact, I've actually owned that since I was 17. I bought that in 1997, travismchenry.com. I've owned it all this time. So yeah, that's where it's got all my personal stuff. But there's also links to most of my tarot decks that are on Amazon and things like that.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you again, and until next time.
Thanks for having me.